Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope this finds you well. This week's Parsha is Vayetze. So this is like Yaakov, Jacob's like emerging Parsha. So last week, as we left it, Yaakov, Jacob, had just kind of stolen the birthright from his brother Esau, from their father Yitzchak, Isaac. So Yaakov successfully tricks Yitzchak into giving him the blessing, and Esau is so mad. He's like, I'm going to kill you, Yaakov. And Yaakov, under the suggestion of his mother, Rebecca, runs to Haran, where Rivka is from. Rivka says, my brother Laban is there. You'll find a wife too. So Yaakov is like running under the cover of darkness. That's where we left off last week. So Yaakov is running, and eventually it becomes nighttime. So he stops. We don't know exactly what it's called. It's called Hamakom, the place. So Yaakov stops in the place and he sleeps for the night. So he's spending the night. At the beginning of the parsha, it says that he arranges stones around his head to lay on. But then after, when he wakes up, it's only one stone. So Rashi, in his commentary, says that all the stones knew that Yaakov was such a righteous guy. So they were all fighting. Like, no, I want to be the rock which Yaakov lays his head on to sleep. No, I want to be the rock. There were 12 rocks, apparently. And God made a miracle and made all of the rocks amalgamate into one rock. So it's kind of a silly story. What does it represent? Rashi makes the point that Yaakov was such a holy person, and holy people in general elevate seemingly mundane things that they are around. So Yaakov was going to sleep, and there were a bunch of rocks around him, and so the rocks became elevated. It has nothing to do with the story about silly rocks. But the point is that we can elevate. If we are truly holy people, as we aspire to be, we can elevate even the most mundane things around us, rocks. So as Yaakov sleeps, he has this famous dream, the Jacob's ladder dream. You did it. Yay. This is like Dora. You did great. So he has the Jacob's ladder dream, which, to be honest, has always kind of puzzled me. I was like, okay, so he has this dream. So what happens in the dream is there are angels going up and down, Malachei Elohim, angels of God, that are going up and down, descending and ascending on a ladder. The ladder is rooted in the ground and it's ascending to Shemaim, to heaven. There's angels going up and down, and God comes to Yaakov and says, Yaakov, the land where you sleep, which is in Israel, the land where you sleep will be the land of your children. I will give it to you. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, ka'afar ha'aretz. You are like the dust of the earth. There will be so many of you. So Yaakov wakes up from his dream and he says this very famous line, there was God in this place, but I didn't know. Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'ani lo yadati. So magical. I mean, if you kind of like break that down, there was God in this place, but I didn't know. Like, that's kind of everywhere. It happens to us in situations where, like if you're about to cross the street, or maybe you're distracted and you decide for whatever reason not to continue crossing the street, and in exactly the place that you would have been, a car slams by. So you're like, oh my gosh, I could have been killed by that car, but for some reason I stopped. Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'ani lo yadati. Hashem was in this place. God was here watching over me, and I didn't know, and now I know. Kind of represents a lot of things. So next time you're in a situation and you're like, wow, that could have been really bad, but I was saved by whatever force you think it is. If you think it's God, if you think it's the universe, whatever it is, that you know that there's a higher power. Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'ani lo yadati. It's really, really magical. So Yaakov has this dream and he's like, I'm going to dedicate this place to God. So it's theorized that this place that he dedicates to God is actually the location of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount being the location where Abraham was to sacrifice Yitzchak. This location that now is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, that is the exact area where Yitzchak was almost sacrificed and where Yaakov slept the night he had the Jacob's ladder dream. It's very cool. So Yaakov has this dream, he wakes up and he starts on to Haran. So he goes to Haran and he sees this well, and there are all these shepherds kind of like hanging out around it. And Yaakov's like, what are you guys doing? Why are you just waiting around this well? It's midday. I see all your sheep are around. And they're like, oh, there's this huge rock on top of the well, and we need a lot of people to lift it. And Yaakov's like, well, I'm here. I can help you. So Yaakov helps them lift the rock. So that's also something interesting to think about. The shepherds couldn't do it themselves. They couldn't do it one of them. They couldn't do it two of them. They couldn't do it three of them. However many people they needed, Yaakov was the final person that they needed to help lift the rock. It's like, the idea of where you're in the grocery store and, there's two people reaching reaching for something high on a shelf, but neither of them want to help each other. And if one of them would just stand on the shoulders of the other, they could both get what they need. It's amazing synergy. When we put our energies towards the same thing, we can be successful in what we are trying to accomplish. So Yaakov helps them move this rock, and their animals can be watered. They're like, oh yeah, by the way, Laban, you said he's your relative. His daughter is going to be by soon. So his daughter Rachel, comes by, and Yaakov like kisses her, and he's like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. This is great. We'll go back to your father's house. And of course, in that moment where he meets her, he falls in love with her. So Yaakov goes to Lavan. He's like, hey, I'm gonna hang out here for a while. I'm kind of not really wanted back in Beersheba where my brother Esau is. And he gets comfortable in Haran, and he tells Lavan, he's like, I love your daughter Rachel, your younger daughter Rachel. He specifically says your younger daughter because Lavan has an older daughter, Leah. And not that she wasn't attractive and lovely as well, but Yaakov didn't love her. So he knew, though, that Lavan was known for being kind of a trickster. So he said specifically, I would like to marry your younger daughter, Rachel, because if he would have just said Rachel, he could have gotten Rachel Schwartz from the shtetl next door, or Rachel Greenberg, who isn't nearly as cute as Rachel, Lavan's daughter. Or if he would have said your daughter, then he would have said, okay, fine, Leah. Leah's the older one. Yaakov really tried. So Yaakov said, your younger daughter, Rachel, I'd like to marry her. And Lavan says, fine, you can marry her, but you have to work for 7 years for me. And Yaakov is like, fine, I love her. I'll do anything. And the day of their wedding, Yaakov, he's really nervous. He thinks that Lavan's going to trick him. So he tells Rachel, he's like, hey, let's make these special codes that under the chuppah, if you are really Rachel, you're going to give me this sort of secret code. So I know that you're not Leah. I know that Lavan's not tricking me into something. And Rachel's like, great. Okay, so the day of the wedding, Rachel sees that her sister Leah is actually being taken to the chuppah, and she knows that if Leah can't do the codes or knows the secret code that Yaakov and her decided that they would have, she's going to be extremely embarrassed. So Rachel is like, oh my gosh, okay, Leah, Yaakov's going to ask you for these codes. These are the codes. This is the secret. This is the secret code. She wants to spare her sister Leah from embarrassment. We learn a really important lesson there. We learn in the Talmud that one should rather throw themselves into a fiery furnace than embarrass someone else. To embarrass someone else is akin to killing them because the blood drains from their face. I don't know about you, but I get vicariously embarrassed for other people because I get really embarrassed. Like if any sort of like confrontation thing, like it makes my heart absolutely drop. It's so embarrassing. Like you feel like so called out. It's an awful feeling. I personally would never want anyone else to have that feeling. So that's what we learned. We learned that we should never make anyone feel embarrassed. There's a lot of little lessons here. So Yaakov ends up marrying Leah instead of Rachel because Rachel tells Leah the code so that Yaakov knows that thinks that it's really Rachel. In the morning, Yaakov is like, wait, you're not Rachel, you're Leah. Okay, what a load of nonsense. If Yaakov loves Rachel and he's under the chuppah with her and then spends the night with her, how does he not realize it's not that dark in ancient Israel? They have candles and stuff. So how did he not recognize her voice or not, apparently they were twins, but still maybe the difference between twins. So there's commentary that the Yaakov didn't realize that it wasn't Rachel because Leah was also his soulmate. As we know, Leah gave birth to a lot of the 12 sons of Jacob, 12 sons of the 12 tribes. So she's really important. From her, we have all these Jewish descendants. So Leah is important. She is one of Yaakov's soulmates. So that's why he didn't notice that it wasn't Rachel, because he knew in his heart that he was with one of his soulmates at least. Okay, so then here's the second question. We're not allowed to have two wives in Judaism. That's like not a thing that we're about. Back in this day, it wasn't even cool. It's in the Torah that it's not cool. Like, interestingly enough, not for any real reason besides the fact that if you have two wives, one of them is always going to be jealous of each other. Amazing. Judaism. But the interesting thing here is that we don't have the Torah yet. So even though marrying two wives wasn't cool back then, there still was no Torah to call them out on. So maybe it's okay that Yaakov had two wives. No, we learned that Yaakov, Yitzchak, and Abraham knew all the Torah divinely, that God kind of planted it into their heads. So if Yaakov, Abraham, and Yitzchak knew the Torah already, then Yaakov having two wives is also not cool. So What's the explanation? What's the explanation here? And the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of Chabad, the Rebbe from Lubavitch, says that Yaakov had two wives for a very simple reason, because Yaakov told Rachel he was going to marry her. And when he married Leah against his own will, then he was like, well, I married Leah, but I told Rachel I would marry her. I promised her that I would marry her, and my word means something. So we got a lot of little nuggets of wisdom in this parsha, a lot of stuff going on. But that last one really, really is so moving to me. So there's a lot of other things that happen in the parsha, but I'll leave it at that. We got a lot to digest. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next week. Happy Thanksgiving.